Please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for Marhum Roshan Daya. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير. وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير. إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير. وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير. إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير. وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور. ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير. والذي جعل لكم الأرض دلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور. أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير. ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير. أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير. أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور. أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور. أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم. قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون. قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون. ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين. قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين صدق الله العلي العظيم. سورة الفاتحة.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك الإثم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك واستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تغنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك ولا مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لكبائر ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي قبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من كبيه سترت وكم من فاده من البلاء أقلت وكم من إسار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرت. اللهم أزم بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي آمالي وقادت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي. يا سيدي فاسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وارفعالي ولا تفزعني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور أتوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما انتبأت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسأله على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك والزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في ساعة رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شدي وساقي. يا ربي ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عزمي. يا من بدا خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هبني لابتداء كرمك وصالفي بالركاب. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد ما انطوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك وتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تعبد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدة وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة وعلى قلوب ترفت بلاهيتك محققة ولا ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارها ساءت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من البلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها ألا أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مقصوه يسير بقايا كثير مدته فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستقيم يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أزيد وأبكي لعليم العذاب وشدة أمل طول البلاء ومدتي فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهلي بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك وبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناتك لأزيجن إليك بين أهلها زجيج الآملين ولا أصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولا أبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولو نادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفتي وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيتي وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرتي وهو يزيج إليك زجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوتا وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في إتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعظيم جاهدك وقضيت به من إخلاد مؤاندك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأ من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فاسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيته وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر نشرت أو رزق بسطت أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رزقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بالضر ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه مؤولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جواره واشدد على العزيمة جوانه وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة المؤمنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فارد ومن قادني فقد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وقلني أسرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجيب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من راس ماله الرجاء وسلاح البكاء يا سابق النعم يا دافع النقم या नूर अल-मुस्तहविशीन फिल-ज़ुलम या आलिमन ला युअल्लम सल्लि अला मुहम्मदिन व आलि मुहम्मद वफ़अल बिमा अंत अहलुहु व सल्लल्लाहु अला रसूलिहि वल अइम्मतिल मयामीन मिन आलिहि व सल्लम तस्लीमन कसीरन कसीरा। सुब्हाना रब्बिका रब्बिल इज़्ज़ति अम्मा यसिफून व सलामुन अलल मुरसलीन वल्हम्दुलिल्लाहि रब्बिल आलमीन। अल-फ़ातिहा।
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله محمد وآل محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين عليا ولي الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين عليا حجة الله. هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا على الفلاح هيا على الفلاح هيا على خير العمل هيا على خير العمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وأن عليا ولي الله عليه الصلاة والسلام. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصلي لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. سميع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. رب اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سميع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سميع له لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. إلهي أنت كما نحب فاجعلنا كما تحب. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد. لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. اللهم صل على محمد. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Somebody had asked me the other day about qunut. So there's similar rules for when you're reciting qunut in your own namaz, just like in jama'ah. So we'll start with jama'ah first. So when the qunut is there, this person was asking, they were confused because they were telling me, the qunut that you recite, that dua, I don't know it, I've never heard it, so I can't follow along. I said, that's fine because you don't have to follow along. Whether it's, we'll jama'ah for right now, you don't have to recite the same thing that the imam is reciting. You can recite any qunut, any dua that you want to. So if the imam is reciting some long, whatever, Quranic dua, whatever that you've never heard of, that's fine. You can say whatever you're used to, or any other Quranic dua. And now the question comes about, okay, what about non-Arabic dua? Can I actually make qunut in another language? For Ayatollah Sistani's opinion, and this now will be for whether it's jama'ah or your own furada prayer, you can add in your own language, whatever language you want, as long as there's some part of the qunut that's in Arabic. So what the recommendation is that when you're going into qunut, you can start with the salawat, and then recite whatever you want afterwards. Any dua, any language, whatever you want, and that's it. That'll be enough. And he says that if you don't add in any sort of Arabic in the qunut, he said, then it's technically not a qunut as part of a namaz anymore. So it doesn't mess up your namaz, it's not going to make it batil, but he said it's not you haven't really done qunut as part of namaz. Yeah, I think that's it for qunut, right? We've mentioned that you can do it in any language as long as you put some Arabic in there, like a salawat or any dhikr. You can recite any dua, it doesn't have to be a Quranic dua. Whatever the imam recites, you can either follow along, again, quietly, as we mentioned last time, or you can recite whatever dua that you are familiar with and that you are used to. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وأن عليا حجة الله عليه الصلاة والسلام حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير عمل حي على خير عمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع على لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد كذلك الله ربنا الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب دعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع على لمن حمده الله أكبر
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. سبحان الله والحمد لله. أستغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر.
سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر.
سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. لا إله إلا الله حقا حقا.
الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله والحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. لا إله إلا الله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم ذو الجلال والإكرام وأتوب إليه.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Sayyid Hasan, Rizvi, respected elders, my dearest brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum, Jameel wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen as well as all other marhumin. Surah Mubarak al-Fatiha. Dua Shfa Maries is requested for all those in need here and elsewhere, as well as those listed on the screen. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. Ya Allah. Let us now invite Sayyid Hasan Rizvi to please come forward for tonight's Majlis by Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad Salawat.
For the soul of Marhum Roshandaya, please recite another Surah Al-Fatiha after a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Continuing our discussion of the hadith of U'man al-Basri, which was the advice regarding the haqiqah of ubudiyah, the reality of true servitude and slavery, by Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. The first trait that he had mentioned was that a person doesn't see anything as their own property. They see everything at Allah's disposal and that they are just a wasila for that property or that money. The second quality which we began discussing last week, the Imam said, وَلَا يُدَبِّرُ الْعَبْدِ لِنَفْسِهِ تَدْبِيرًا. That an abd, as part of this true reality of ubudiyah, a true slave or servant of Allah does not plan, manage or govern anything for themselves. And the Imam says, وَإِذَا فَوَّضَ الْعَبْدِ تَدْبِيرَ نَفْسِهِ عَلَى مُدَبِّرِ. That when this abd, when he delegates the mudabbir, يعني Allah, when he lets Allah decide and manage and plan and govern his life, حَانَ عَلَيْهِ مَصَائِبُ الدُّنْيَا. That all the issues, difficulties and trials, all the musibat in dunya will mean nothing. It'll be insignificant and trivial. So first thing we did was looked at this word tadbir, coming from dabara or dabura. And what does it mean? Because we said, it's a bit confusing how the Imam would say, don't be a planner, don't manage things well, when we know very well from other riwayat that no, we're supposed to be good managers and planners. Like, so what exactly is meant here? So the first step was to say, let's look a bit deeper at the word tadabbur, dubur, dabir, all these words which come from the same root letters of da, ba, ra. We said that although there's various meanings in terms of being, in different contexts, it can mean going back, it can mean retreating. Tadabbur obviously meaning reflecting or meditating on the Quran. The common spiritual, deeper element of the meaning was that tadabbur or dabr or dabir, everything was about going back to something's root, going back to something's genesis, its inception, where something began. And we said the reason possibly why a mudabbir or a planner is called this person, or this word is used, is because a proper planner can see something from its point of inception. They know how something began, and they're able to see the final end goal, the end result, the purpose, the true purpose, and they know exactly how to trace the most wise way in between. So they have the perfect plan in mind to go from that starting position to that end goal, from A to B. And so Allah is al-Mudabbir. He's the only one who can truly, perfectly, infinitely plan like this. He is the beginning and the end, al-awwal al-akhir. So now we continue with that. And we said last week that we wanted to talk about how there are different dimensions and different levels of planning. There's different realms and aspects to it. So before we actually go into, how does somebody plan for themselves, rather, what does the Imam mean here when he says, don't plan for yourself, let Allah plan? Before that, we want to go into the different levels and dimensions that are there. If you can recite a Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So as we said, it's obvious that all of us know, whenever you see a good manager, a good governor, politician, somebody who's managing a center, organization, a building, a corporation, anything like that. When somebody does that very well, usually the quality of wisdom also goes along with that, right? Somebody who's very good at managing and planning and governing, you wouldn't say that they were unwise. Normally you wouldn't. It normally requires some level of wisdom to be able to be a good planner and a manager, right? When we talk about that wisdom, hikmah, if we're using the Arabic, in the discussions of our philosophers, the hukama, right? We use the word philosopher, but the actual word that's used for them, hukama, comes from the word hakim, which is hikmah, which is wisdom. So the idea of philosophy is that it's the science or discipline of wisdom. That these individuals, the philosophers, whether Islamic or Greek, whoever you're talking about, are people who are studying the concept of wisdom itself. From there, they actually divide wisdom into two parts. There's two kinds of wisdom, or two discussions about wisdom. There's hikmah nadhari and hikmah amali. Hikmah nadhari is theoretical wisdom, which is usually what we would just call philosophy proper, right? Discussing things like, the nature of causality, how to philosophically prove that God exists. They talk about the concept of wujud and being, all these ideas. So that's all the theoretical stuff. But then they say there's something called hikmatul amali, or hikmatul amaliya, practical wisdom. They say when you have all that theory, what does it look like when you put it into practice? I said, okay, when a person is practicing wisdom, when they're now applying it in their lives, these practical wisdoms come in three different dimensions. There's three realms of practical wisdom. And what we're going to say here is that they all have to do with management and planning. That's the idea. So the first level is at the level of the self. A person should be able to apply that wisdom and therefore self-manage, self-govern, self-discipline. You have to be able to manage your own affairs properly. That's the first sort of level of wisdom. They say after that, the second level is at the home. You should be able then to plan things and affairs at your house, for your family, for, with your spouse, with your children, immediate nuclear family, extended family, etc. After that, the final stage, at least according to most philosophers, the final one is after the self, after the family, then you come to the level of the city or the community. So if we're using the, let's say, formal words for this, first stage is what we call ethics, right? Managing myself, what is that? That's ethics, it's akhlaq. That second stage then is what's called domestics. Now you're taking care of what's happening in your own domicile domestically. Sometimes it's also called economics, But that word economics has been hijacked by those who only use that word in terms of finances. But traditionally, when the Greeks used it, this word economics comes from two parts, right? Ekos, nomos, economos. That first part of econ, or econ, means home. It didn't have anything to do with just doing with finances and money and budgeting. That was a part of it, because the spouses, the husband and wife, primarily the husband, in traditional society, they needed to learn how to manage money. So learning how to budget was a part of it. So this is part of home management. Even now, I don't know if this still happens in public schools, but at least when I was around, they actually had a class that you could take in high school, which was an easy A class, that's what it was there for, but it was called home economics. But if you take the classical definition, there's no point in saying it like that, because economics itself means home management, but leave that aside. Anyway, domestics is what's normally called. And then the last level is when you get to the community or the city, that's called civics or politics. So you have ethics, domestics, and then civics and politics. Or you manage one person, the smallest microcosmic unit is a single individual. How do I manage myself? How do I plan for myself? Well, okay, once I figured that out, once I've done tadbir or ta'dibun nafs, once I figured out how to manage myself, work on my akhlaq, then the smallest next possible unit is when you add one other individual. And now you have a home, and you get married. How do I manage that now? Now there's another nafs along with me. I've tried my best to manage my own nafs, but now I have somebody else along with me. How do we manage this together? So both in the Greek classics and then the philosophers too, they say this is in this realm of planning, this idea of tarbiyah is engaged there. Marital relations, how do people communicate with their spouses? This stuff used to be discussed, right, in our classical texts, and it still is to this day. How much of it reaches the mimbar and our ears is a different conversation. But this is what people used to talk about in terms of wisdom. That was there. And then, of course, budgeting too. And then once you have children, okay, well, how do we manage that? How do we plan that? Because, the idea was, okay, I've managed myself. Now there's two of us. I went from I to we. And now we have to train these little nafses in our house too, right? These little children that are running around with pure nafs, pure ego, pure animals. How do we help train them? Now, if I've conquered myself, if husband and wife have worked together helping conquering their own nafs together, then we should be able to work together to help and train these children so that they can destroy their ego and their nafs as well. Say, okay, now you've gone from one individual, now you've got either two or let's say, 4 if you have, 2 kids. Then when you take that unit, that family unit, you start taking more of them and putting them in, one locale in one area. What is that? That's a community. That's a jama'ah. That's a city. It talks about traditional ways. So that, then, you jump to the next level. Okay, now it's politics. We figured out how to manage the self. We manage the family. Now the final level. Now there's a bunch of families. How do we manage each other together? Civics and politics. So you have first level, tadbir nafs, right? How do I self-manage, self-govern, plan for myself? Now the second is, how do I do tadbir al-manzil? How do I engage in planning and managing a home? How do I take care of everything here? Spousal relations with kids, things like that. How do I do that? And then the final is, okay, how do I manage a society? How do I manage a center? How do I manage a community? What are the rules involved there too now that we have other families involved? Or, literally governing and planning. So these are the actual 3 levels that the ulama talk about, or the philosophers talk about, and this order here matters. And the reason why we have a lot of issues is because in practice, a lot of us jump down to level 3 before we even begin to look at level 1 or 2. And this is where we find a lot of the issues. Let's jump right away to a hadith attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. He's reported to have said in this famous narration that I'm sure many of you have heard, Man nasaba nafsahu linnas imama. Whoever decides to do intisab, who appoints themselves and makes themselves an imam, some sort of leader, فَلْيَبْدَأَ بِتَعْلِيمِ نَفْسِهِ قَبْلَ تَعْلِيمِ غَيْرِ. This person then needs to do ta'aleem and educate themselves before they go out and educate other people. Right? Meaning, you want to go out and teach others? Fine. You want to be a leader? Fine. You better start educating yourself first. وَلْيَكُنْ تَأْدِيبُهُ بِصِيرَتِهِ قَبْلَ تَأْدِيبِ لِلِسَانِهِ. He said, this person then must make sure that ta'deeb, that discipline, that self-discipline, through their own seerah, meaning they've done discipline of their nafs, so now there's a legacy, somebody can see how they've changed themselves, the seerah that they've left behind. That is what's going to lead to the ta'deeb and the discipline of other people, not through their lisan. This person can't just go around, claim to be a leader, and start saying, we need to do this, we need to do that, you should be like this, you should be like that, if they haven't done it for themselves first. Meaning a true leader, somebody will look at them and say, look, this person has done it, they're practicing what they're preaching, literally, right? وَمُعَلِّمُ نَفْسِهِ مُؤَدِّبُهَا أَحَقُّ بِأَجْلَالِ مِنْ مُعَلِّمُ النَّاسِ وَمُؤَدِّبِهِمْ. A mu'allim, a teacher of his own nafs, and a person who disciplines himself, somebody who teaches himself first, who disciplines himself, this person has more right of ijlal, meaning having this sort of might and majesty, or if we're putting it in fancy irfani terms, that this jala that Allah has, this might, this majesty, this power, this ability to dictate rule and law to others, the only people who have a right over that are the ones who have done that to themselves. I've been able to command my own nafs. That's what can give somebody else or some person the right to start commanding other people. You want to be a good political leader or a grassroots movement person, all this stuff, you want to get involved in outreach, inreach, whatever it is, fine. Make sure you're practicing that stuff first. Otherwise, Imam says here, you have no right to be doing these things. So the problem is that many people, they jump out to these examples right away. They jump out, they skip the akhlaqi part of it, they skip the family notion of it, and they just jump to this kind of global sort of movement. Let's get out there, let's spread the message, let's do X, Y, Z. Like, hold on a second. Do they actually meet the criteria or not? And I'm just giving you one simple one. The Ahlul Bayt have gone into much more detail about the qualities necessary for leaders. And every single one of them, usually you won't see things about, make sure that they have so-and-so idea about economics or planning. Usually that stuff is not the main emphasis. You'll see that Imam, in many traditions, especially when, obviously he was the Khalifa, you see a lot of narrations about how to pick governors and provincial leaders, people in charge of your treasury, things like that. So he left these things there. And most of the qualities have to do with a person's akhlaq. He would say, if you're going to pick a leader, make sure they're generous. If you're going to pick a leader, make sure that they're kind and tolerant. If you're going to pick a leader, make sure that they only tell the truth. These are the qualities he's talking about. Whereas when we look out in the world right now, especially when it comes to U.S. politics, do any of these qualities actually matter? Not really. People might just go with somebody because they agree on a certain policy issue. Or, as it is especially with, unfortunately, U.S. politics, they look the part. They sound the part, and that's it. For very superficial reasons. And we would expect that us as followers of the Ahlul Bayt should know better than that. I mean, if not for our own Muslims, not for non-Muslim leaders, at least our Muslim leaders. But, if we're going to extend it out to everybody, it should go out to non-Muslim leaders too. That these same qualities should apply to them as well. But again, we skip all these steps because we don't know that there is a specific hierarchy and a pecking order to all of this. Let me share with you a famous story about Imam Musa Sadr, if you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So I'm sure many of you know Imam Musa Sadr, rahmatullah alayh, this great leader who most likely has passed away. Great leader in Lebanon. And there's many stories about his leadership skills and what he did in terms of the movement, what happened in Lebanon there, where you had issues of irreligiosity, people were, there's a lot of infighting among the Shias then, a lot of problems there. And many ulama use his stories as examples because he was one of these, we have many gems of ulama obviously who had leadership positions, and he's definitely one of them. And nearly every single one of his stories about how to run communities, how to take care of individuals, irreligious people, religious people, dealing with non-Muslims, there's stories regarding almost all of these things. And especially when we're trying to figure out, let's say, the relationship between someone who's involved in, let's say, religious community work and how they have interactions and their relationship with a center or a community, these stories, I think, are really helpful. So in this one incident, they say that Imam Musa Sadr, he would, normally after Jumu'ah, he would go and kind of just, walk around the streets. And just kind of go and patrol, so to speak, just to see what was going on. One day he ended up, after Jumu'ah, he went to the beach. Because he had heard some people had told him that, there's some youth in the community, they skip Jumu'ah and they go and hang out at the beach. And some of them, they're going with their non-mahram. He's like, okay, sure. So now the reason that he was being told this by whoever was telling him was because they wanted him to go and, yell at the kids, obviously, right? That's usually what people do. Here's a problem, go yell at the kids, go yell at the uncles, go yell at the aunties, right? Just call them out for what they're doing. So he goes to the beach. And now these youth there's 2 guys, 2 girls, and they're on the beach, and then one of the guys notices from far away, he sees this black amama, some guy like from far away coming towards them. They're like, oh my God, it's Sayyid. So, no, not me. So they're like, hold on. So they grab their towels, they cover themselves up, they try to do whatever they can. And, then they switch on the religious mode, like, Assalamu alaikum, Sayyid, and all that other stuff. And, we're so sorry, I can't believe we're here, we missed Jummah. They start making up all these excuses. And, they get into the panic mode. So he just comes there, he doesn't say, alaikum salam, he doesn't say a word, he just sits down, and he's quiet. They're like, what do we do? Like, I don't know. So they just sit down next to him. And after like a minute or two, he's quiet, and then he's like, you shouldn't be the ones apologizing to me. I should be apologizing to you. It's like, Sayyid, why are you saying something like that? It's like, we should have been at Jum'ah. We're clearly with non-mahram doing things we shouldn't. Like this, we should be apologizing. We're breaking the rules. This is not right. What do you mean that you should apologize? He said, because I'm the reason why you're not coming to Jum'ah. He's like, what is it that I'm not doing or that I am doing that's causing you to come in this place and do this instead of coming to Jum'ah or coming to the center or coming to the masjid? Like, what is my deficiency? Tell me. Let's sit down and talk right now and figure that out. So this is my fault, not yours. Now I know you're hearing that right now and you're like, okay, say it. So now when we blame you, meaning me for everything, now it makes sense because we have the story to back you up. Okay, so if it's from April 2020 up until now, you can blame me for whatever you want. But anything before that, then we call those pre-existing conditions. You can't blame me for any of those issues. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I think that's a fair deal, right? Okay. So the idea is, and again, we have other riwayat about this too, but for lack of time, I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. That the Ahlul Bayt have also said that, the ulama, it's very important for them to have these specific akhlaqi qualities. Otherwise, because sometimes ulama, or people who act like ulama or pretend to be, they put themselves up and people put them on pedestals, and their pseudo-akhlaq or ethics or their mannerisms and behavior becomes a role model, an example for everybody else. So when people see so-called alim or speaker doing something, then they'll say, well, so-and-so did it, so why can't we? So-and-so talks like this, so why can't I? So-and-so goes to these kind of places, why can't I? If they can do it, they studied the Quran and Hadith, so how could it be so bad? And that's obviously very confusing for youth and adults alike too, when they see certain behavior being, practiced by these individuals that are there. And again, I know I'm sure people have some people in their mind. That's not the point of it. The idea is that the people who are at these positions, whether it's an alim or anybody else, and in any sort of leadership position, they have to make sure that it's not just preaching and giving these like ideal qualities and mannerisms and behaviors. They have to set the standard. They have to be the example. If they want, let's say, the youth to act a certain way, well, then they better do the same thing too. If they're not doing that, if not leading by example, then almost guaranteed the other people, the so-called those who they're ruling over or governing over, they're definitely not going to follow through. Because if they're thinking, which is right, if my so-called leader, my imam, my alim, whatever, if they can't manage themselves, they can't take care of themselves, why would I even bother following them? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, like we said, even though this order of planning and managing and governing goes from the self, an individual, to then to family, and then to politics or community, we end up doing things kind of in reverse order. We jump to the last stage without going through the proper stages. Right? We jump to want to be leaders without making sure that our ethics or our family's on point, which brings us to the second point then. Because, we're going in reverse order for that reason. And the second is about how we have to look at ourselves in terms of the way that we manage our families. So let's look at Surah Tahrim, Surah 66, Ayah 6. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. O mu'mineen, warn and take care and beware of yourselves, and then take care of your families and protect them from fire. the ulama are very careful about the language that Allah is using over here. He says, look, right at the beginning, Allah is saying, first, take care of yourself. Remember that first step was take care of yourself, save yourself, protect yourself from fire. Then afterwards, after you figure that out, that's the only way you're going to be able to protect your family. If you can't save yourself, how do you think you can go around and help your family? It's not going to happen. Now, it's possible that some people might go to, there's different types of extremes. One extreme that I've heard before, and that even the companions had in their minds too, is that, what if I'm not perfect? I hear this a lot, right? I'm not perfect. I haven't perfected myself. That means I shouldn't get married, or I shouldn't have kids. Or if I do have kids, I can't tell them to do anything because I'm still not a perfect individual. I have problems. Many of the ashab had the same thing in their mind, and they came and asked Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. So Imam Sadiq narrates that when this ayah came down, right, when it came and descended to Rasulullah, and he recited it, then this man came and sat down next to Rasulullah. And he started crying. And then he said to Rasulullah, "Ajartu an nafsi," or "Ajaztu an nafsi." He said, I can't even take care of myself. He says, this ayah is saying protect myself, warn myself, I shouldn't go towards the fire, all that. He's like, but I can't take care of myself. He says, kufiltu ahli. He's like, if I can't take care of myself, how am I going to do this for my family? So he was kind of freaking out because he's like, well, Allah just said that, you have to take care of yourself and your family, but how am I going to do my family because I can't do myself? Like, he was worried about that. Qala Rasulullah, and the Prophet responded, Hasbuka an ta'murahum bima ta'muru bihi nafsak. He said, look, I'm giving you a very specific formula over here. It's enough that you do amr bil ma'ruf. You command your family whatever you have commanded to yourself. So you can look at that now in two ways. Well, let me finish the ayah and then we'll go back. وَتَنْهَاهُمْ عَمَّا تَنْهَا عَنْهُ نَفْسَكَ. And you do nahi عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, the things that you've done nahi for yourself too. So again, there's two parts of this now. So that means, okay, if there are things that I've made, I'm practicing certain wajibat, and I've planned and organized and governed myself, I discipline myself to do these wajibat, like praying on time, fasting in Ramadan, whatever it is, okay, then I can do that same commanding, that amr bil ma'ruf, to my family. If I see that they're about to make their salah qada, then I can go and warn them of that, right? Or if they're about to do something haram, and I'm preventing myself from doing that haram, then I can go ahead and do that. Because I'm practicing it, then I should be able to go, and I should be able to go and tell my own family. So that's one part of it. Like, okay, if I'm practicing it, then I can go and tell, no problem. But okay, well, what if I'm not practicing it then? What if there's some wajib that I'm not doing? Am I allowed now to go and order? So some might say, well, if we're taking it literally, that means, hey, you're not doing it, so you can't order your family. But what the ulama will obviously comment on over here is that this is an instruction. It's a guidance to say, hey, if you're trying to protect yourself from the fire and your family from the fire, and there's certain things that you haven't commanded yourself to do, then you need to start going and doing that then. It's simple. Step one was work on yourself. Allah's saying, okay, go do it then. If that wajib is missing, or you still have that haram on your plate, then go and fix that. The minute you start doing that amr bil ma'ruf and nahi anil munkar to yourself, now you can start doing it to your family too. So it's not saying put that responsibility aside. It's Allah saying, no, I'm pushing you then to that responsibility. If you have any concern for your family, then by extension, you have to have it for yourself first and foremost. So don't skip that, sort of pecking order. And I know that a lot of times with families, we have this, as we should as parents or grandparents, uncles, aunts, whomever, we have this desire where we want the next generation, those who are, under us, the kids, etc., we want them to be better than us. We know we have our own issues. We have our faults. We have our deficiencies. So we try to push them hard, which is understandable. We know it's coming from a good place. The issue is that is only going to happen. It's only going to work if we've pushed ourselves at least that amount, but most likely we have to do it much more than that. How in the world is our child going to see that struggling in the way of Allah is actually beneficial and is worthwhile if they don't see me sweating and pushing, blood, sweat, and tears in the same way? If they don't see that, hey, for example, let's say I lose my temper with my daughter. I make a mistake now, I say something that I shouldn't. If I don't come and say, look, I apologize, said, look, I shouldn't have lost my temper like that. Allah doesn't like people who lose their temper and anger like this. What I said was not correct. I wish what I said was this. and maybe I can work on it by doing X, Y, Z. So do you forgive me? Hopefully they will. And again, this should be happening even with, if you have 3, 4, 5-year-olds, you should be doing this too. Now, I know some people, they've set up a block of kind of arrogance in themselves where they want to apologize to children. You want them to apologize to you, you should be apologizing to them too, right? You should be able to lead by example like that. The best part is if they actually see you make mistakes, explain them that you're making mistakes, and then you correct your own behavior, they say, okay, that means that if I do make a mistake, I can actually come and correct myself and actually grow. That, okay, my mom and dad, they do make mistakes. And they apologize for it and they correct it right away. Okay, so now I see how this works. So from all that, they see how to correct their own behavior, and they're also seeing, again, going back to the initial concept, how the nafs and ego is destroyed. They say, elders can also admit that they're wrong. Elders can also admit that they've made mistakes. But no matter what their age is, they can also go through this process of planning and organizing and disciplining themselves. And then the best part is for that child, if they can get all these skills that you and I wish we had when we were younger, if they can get it now, then that perfection that we want for them, of course they're going to have it much later on. Of course they're going to get it by the time they're, baligh or baligha, whatever. Because we've set up that foundation at an early stage. So that is the point of all of this. Now, and it goes without saying, I think we all know this. When that stuff, whatever we want, we actively practice it in the home. Even the mustahab stuff that we want them to do. You want them to be attached to the Quran, you better make sure you're reading it enough that they see you and hear you reading it. Not that you're off in the corner somewhere in the middle of the night or randomly in the car, whatever, listening. They have to know that it's a part of your daily life. It can't, there can't be secrets in family like that. Your children have to see that you're doing these things too, because they know that, look, this is a part of life. They have to see, for example, that, hey, your mom and I, we pray Jum'ah in the house sometimes. Right? We pray together. Awwal al-waqt, waqt al-fadila, all these ideas. That becomes, again, a part and parcel of it. And they'll, monkey see, monkey do, observational learning. That's how it works in those first few stages. They see it, they're going to practice it. If they're not going to see it, it doesn't matter what rational arguments you give, doesn't matter how many ayat you throw in their face, how many hadith you do, what Islamic school you give them. That's really not going to matter much. All those other things are complementary and supplementary. What happens in the home, that self-planning and management, that family planning and management, which again, we said starts with the individual, all of that will tell you what's going to happen in the house. All of that will lead to your children being able to grow and go beyond that. And of course, sometimes the children take it, very literally too. This afternoon, one of our daughters was with us praying, and in the middle of the surah, I was just, scratching myself like this. So of course, what does she do next to me? She starts scratching herself like this. So, this is how much they obviously copy. They think that everything that you're doing is a part of it. Now, of course, you have to explain what things are a part, what things are not, but you get the picture. The idea is every single little action you do, they're watching. Every single thing that you do. Everything you say, they're copying. They're learning a style of language. So we have to be very, 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 very intentional about how we do these things. The last point before we end as well is, somebody asked me a few weeks ago. They said, we have all these riwayat which say that marriage is nisfuddin. Nikah, nisfuddin. That getting married is half of your deen. It's half your religion, or it completes your religion. Like, how is that possible? You just recite a bunch of Arabic words and that's it? That's it? Now half your religion is done? Like, hold on, let's go deeper. If you follow this self-planning, self-managing hierarchy, then yes. Meaning, by yourself, when you were a bachelor or bachelorette, on your own, you tried your best to manage yourself and destroy your ego. We're all going to have blocks. We can only get to a certain point by ourselves. I know the modern world likes to say, everybody be independent, you can achieve anything on your own. No, that's not true. Islam says male and female were created as pairs for a reason. Yes, male and female, that's right. We're created as pairs for a reason. The male is there to complement the female, and likewise the female is there to complement the male. Allah has put certain qualities in the male, these Jalali names, and in the female, the Jamali names. We are able, as men, hopefully, we're practicing and learning and manifesting these Jalali names, these powerful names. And then when we get married, the women hopefully are showing us the Jamali names, right? And that's where you get nisfuddin, that's where you get half your deen. Hopefully, our spouses have worked on completing half their deen by themselves. We've completed, hopefully, half our deen by ourselves. Now when you put 50-50 together, I know there's enough accountants here to add the math, right? That's where that 100% will come. Now that both of you have learned the other names of Allah from each other, now when you have children there, whether they're sons or daughters, shouldn't matter, because now you've got all the tools at your disposal. All the names of Allah are in your hands, you've manifested them, and your child should be able to see that in the household. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, as we said, it's a three-tiered process. There's the self, manage the self, govern the self, plan, discipline the self. Then you can go to spousal relations, families, tarbiyah, all of that. And that includes a lot of things. And then that's finally, after all of that, you can move on to civics and politics and community stuff. You take that out of order, then you can usually see where there's issues. Meaning if you see issues with families, then you know sometimes it comes from individuals. You see issues in communities, usually it's because of families. Why is it families? Maybe because of the individuals, right? So you can trace these things back in most cases. Now, what exactly does it mean to get involved in the self-planning, self-management ethics? Meaning, what are we supposed to be discussing? What the Imam's saying? Inshallah, we'll continue with that next week. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If we're going to talk about family management, the ideal household, of course, we have to talk about the Ahlul Bayt. And especially when we look at Imam Ali, Bibi Fatima, Imam Hasan, Imam Hussein, Bibi Zainab, Bibi Kulthum. When we see that perfect household, that perfect husband, the perfect wife, the perfect father, the perfect mother, the perfect children, sons and daughters, that cohesive family, how they're there helping each other out, how they delegated and split their duties, and they supported one another and everything. This is why we hold them up to such high esteem and high regard. As individuals, they had that isma. Therefore, in the house, you see isma. And therefore, everything that they go out and they govern and that they touch has that fragrance of isma as well too. And that's why anybody who was around them and learning from them and benefiting from them, they got those pieces of isma as well, to whatever degree and capacity. Even in their musibah, you see how the family is cohesive and how difficult it was at certain points, where you see the individuals, how they go through their musibah in their own way and how the families react to it. I think probably the most difficult example would be when Imam Ali alayhi salam is struck on the head. And when he moves off to the side, Salah is finished, Imam Hasan takes over. Imam Ali is on the side now, sitting down, trying to finish his Fajr. After this, they say Imam Hasan comes, he sits down, he takes the head of his father, he puts it in his lap, with blood now all over his lap. And they say that when Imam Ali's head was in the lap of his son Hasan, he felt a few teardrops hitting his head, and then he began to hear the cries of Imam Hasan. And the cries got louder and louder and louder. And then Imam Ali said, Ya Bunayya, oh my son, why are you crying like this? He said, this is nothing. Death is a part of life. People come and go. He said, you shouldn't be worried about something like this. It's like, don't you know, in a short while, I'll be able to meet Rasulullah. I'll be able to meet your mother Fatima in just a short while. So don't grieve for me. Don't cry for me, because it'll be okay. It'll be fine for me. But we know that as they make their way back to the house, as they finally reach there, and as Bibi Zainab comes forward and she sees the state that her father's in, when she begins to cry out loud, then Imam Ali as a father has no choice and begins to cry. And Imam Hasan and Imam Hussein are confused. They said, Baba, you told us that we shouldn't be crying and grieving like this, but now you're grieving in this way too. Before you were able to compose yourself and you had sabr, but now what happened? He says, but when I heard my daughter Zainab crying in this manner, how could I not hold myself back? How could I hold myself back when I hear Zainab crying in such a way? يعلم الذين ظلموا ما منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Let's move on to our Slido quiz, inshallah, with another salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So this, I believe, is the standing as it is right now from the past, right? We're trying to do a month-long quiz. We had some technical difficulties last week. Let's see how this works. Hopefully everybody's logged in, or you stay logged in on your app or the website, so that way it registers your previous answers, things like that. I think whenever media, I think you're ready, let's just get started, inshallah. Okay, good luck. Which of these transactions or professions are haram? Intervening in someone else's transaction in order to buy the items that the other person wants, being a butcher, transactions with fraud and deceit, transactions with immoral people, or all of the above. Which of these are haram? Okay, most of you got it correct. Transactions that have to do with fraud, deceit, falsely advertising something, hiding a defect in an item or something, selling counterfeit things as real, this is haram, not allowed. The other things that are listed here, those are all makruh. So like being a butcher, for example, makruh. Transactions with immoral people is considered makruh. Intervening, jumping in and trying to haggle while somebody else is in the middle of their transaction is also makruh. Okay, next. In Surah Maryam, Allah says that everyone in existence will come to Ar-Rahman in what state? As what? As a Muslim, as a mu'min, as an abd, or as a sinner. How will everything, all people or all creations, or all living things, those with intellect, how do they come back to Ar-Rahman? Yes, we said they all come back to Allah as an abd. Ahsant. Most of you got that. Okay, number 3, in Surah Anbiya, these creations are described as never preceding Allah in speech and always acting according to His command. Are they the angels, the mukhlasin, or the abidin? In these ayat, in Surah Anbiya 26 through 27, Allah describes certain individuals or creations. Which ones was He talking about there? Yes, most mufassirin said that it's the angels who do not precede Allah in speech and always act according to His command. Final question. Green Eggs and Ham is a book by which author? Ronald Dahl, Beatrix Potter, Dr. Seuss, or A.A. Milne? Or if you don't like this title, you can say Green Eggs and Halal Turkey Bacon. I don't know if that's okay with you. Okay. Ahsant, Dr. Seuss. So Bande Khuda still at top, but only by, I don't know, it's the same amount of questions. I can't tell what it was before. But everybody else looks like it's the same amount of questions. So I can't tell if anybody's answer is actually registered or not. So this is very, very confusing. But okay, Building Self, second place, MM in third, and Love Moon Sighting. Very close behind in third, fourth place with only 1 second behind in their answers. So we'll see. I think maybe we'll continue it one more week, inshallah. We'll try to end it next week for the quiz of May. And we'll see who can take first place. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala Ahl Baytihi at-Tayyibin at-Tahirin.
Before we conclude tonight's program, I'd like to invite Brother Sajjad Daya to please come forward and say a few words. Bar Muhammad wa Muhammad salawat.
Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the Daya family, on behalf of my father, Marhum Roshan Daya, to thank the community and to thank you all for the kindness and compassion that you've showed us and for partaking in this Majlis and for partaking in his funeral. Your compassion has been very moving and very touching to us, so thank you. I'd also like to thank the extraordinary efforts of the burial committee and for those who helped in preparing his janazah and washing his body and, the things that you did. Thank you so much for everything you did. I'd like to ask all of you if my father in any way hurt you or upset you, to forgive him, to find it in your heart to forgive him. If there are any outstanding debts, to let us know, a member of his family, so that we can settle those debts. And I'd also like to let you know that we'll be holding a Majlis at his home in Timakwan on Saturday at 6:30 p.m. for all gents, and niyaz will be served. Thank you so much. Salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله السلام عليك يا وارث علي أمير المؤمنين ولي الله السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الردي الزكي الهادي المهدي وأشهد أن أئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن بشرائع ديني وخواتيم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله وأوداءه السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الناصح السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي طبتم وطابت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوطهم على الإسلام أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زهد فيه غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل وألحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم. السلام عليك يا أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن، عجل الله فرجك وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.